Welcome back to the channel, people. It's nice to see you again. It's been quite some time since I've put out a YouTube video here on the channel. Today we have something special. Decentraland had a summit in Argentina. A lot of people apparently went. To be honest, I had no idea it was actually happening so much to me staying connected to the community these days. However, there are videos on the official Decentraland channel which I would like to review with you, and I would like to provide some of my comments here and there just to spice it up a little bit. I'm not going to watch the full video series with you. I'm gonna just look at some of the segments which I find particularly interesting, and even there, I think I'm going to cut out a few of the sections. I just find it so fascinating that for the very first time, we have quite a lot of additional information about the Decentraland team and about the origin story of Decentraland. And it goes really further back than I knew that there was a story to tell. So I think I've learned something here today, and I just want to watch it one more time carefully with you and add some comments here. Hopefully, this is an interesting format. Let's get started right away. So here we are, like 6 minutes into the part one of the summit videos on the official Decentraland channel. Let's go.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. I think this part of the summit is to tell you about the story of Decentraland, how we started. So we were, I think, four masterminds that were thinking about Decentraland for a long time. We have a picture there, Esteban, Ari, Manu Araos with the yellow avatar, and myself. Manu is very conscious about his image online, so you will see his face in that way during presentation.
So one comment already here. So you have to imagine the guy on the right, Yemel, I believe, right? I've seen him only once in 4 years on inside a video, and it was an interview with a bunch of blockchain guys, I believe, and they were speaking about about Decentraland, about the metaverse, and Yemel and one other gentleman here on the picture. I'm not sure which one it was. They they looked actually exactly like the look here on the left, very young, and I would almost say somewhat inexperienced in terms of public relations and in terms of how to speak in public and what to say and what not to say. And here, all of a sudden, bam, you have this guy on the right who is grown up and super polished and well spoken. So it's you already here, just visually, you can see there's been quite a lot of progress inside the Decentraland team, and we've never had insights like this. At least I had no idea those insights existed, and now we actually get to see how all of this came together. I find this beautiful, even for those guys who have been around for a long time and think that they knew everything about Decentraland.
I started working here in Buenos Aires, Argentina, at local companies, startups. And by 2013, I got into Bitcoin. And I think Bitcoin really blew my mind when we wrote the white paper, because they bring a solution that for us Argentinians makes total sense. Maybe if you live in United States, you don't have any problems making a payment or doing an international wire. But here in Argentina, we have so many capital controls. It's not easy to move money around the world. It's not easy to get a job internationally and get paid.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little bit, but I think it was interesting to hear that all of this was kind of based on the idea of Bitcoin.
So in 2000, I started working for an American company called BitPay. It's a payment processor. And with Manu and Esteban, we formed the Buenos Aires team working, building open source. For me, that was the first time working in English, working remotely, and building open source software. Creating tools for making transactions in the Bitcoin network, and getting feedback from community all around the world.
I mean, this kind of explains these guys were they were like hardcore geeks, technical guys, software engineers. In 2015, I mean, that's crazy. A lot of the Decentraland OSGs pride themselves to have been in Decentraland before the official release in February 2020. But these guys were kind of getting started 5 years earlier, which is crazy to think.
And eventually we stopped working at BitPay at different times, but we keep the house and continue with this. I'm having issues with the presentation there. So we have this is a picture of the crew. Started being 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14. Eventually we rent another place, we overflow. It was really small, but we have enough capacity to have 14 people working. And here's some pictures of us sharing in the co-working area or one of the offices. And I think that there is one situation that I can remark about this experience. It was like 4 years of working in this space. And one thing that I really value is the space for lunch. Like we all work at different startups, different projects, but we share the space. And okay, let's do a hackathon. Let's take a week. Idea, what's the communication, what's the blog post, what's the prototype. Everyone was looking to build a company when we engaged on this. We're actually engaging on making a prototype of an idea. Showing the world that it was possible, making a point and a statement. Building a company is a different kind of commitment, like 1 week versus years. But well, Decentraland was one of those ideas. So let's talk about the first prototype. That was accomplished by Manu and Esteban. So the conversation was, if we can have blockchain used to store the ownership of Bitcoins, can we use blockchain to store the ownership of any other digital asset? Wouldn't that be great? At that time, NFTs was not a concept. And we said, okay, maybe we can do like a representation of land in a 2D world. So you have a pixel grid.
You gotta check this out. Huh? They had 8 likes on Facebook.
There. So this was the idea. Make a 2D pixel grid. That this was web-based, peer-to-peer protocol. So you connected with your browser, and your browser connects to any other browser that is connected to the same website at the same time, and they share the state of the world. And your browser starts mining for pieces of land around the center. And you can only mine land that is adjacent to already existing land. And if you are the owner of the land, you are the only one allowed to define what's the color of your land.
Okay, we get that. This was the first prototype. I mean, to be honest, I didn't understand at times why the foundation team was always so rigid around certain fundamental principles in Decentraland. But it starts to make sense. I mean, these guys started 5 years earlier than most of us joined back in the days. And if their first prototype was this land-based idea before NFTs were a thing, this is obviously an idea that was destined to stay alive and to be the foundation of this whole kind of ownership experience on the blockchain. So the fact that they actually launched something called Worlds afterwards, outside of this map idea, was actually quite a big step for them, I guess, looking at some of this information here. Some of those ideas and some of those team members that, some have maybe complex interactions with, I mean, they go way back in the team and way back in time. And now we're going to get to see some of this, but I'm going to skip forward a little bit.
Other digital assets stored in the blockchain. Again, this was in 2015. That's when the Facebook account, GitHub organization were created. Most of the domain was registered in 2015. And that was the first prototype. Let's go to the second prototype. The Decentraland project stayed there as an idea, as a first prototype for a year. We continue working in our projects or companies. And 1 year later, we have the opportunity to travel to an amazing place in the world. Maybe you already know this place. Can you recognize it? That's Burning Man, yeah. It's for those who don't know it, it's a festival that is hosted in Nevada, in the United States. 80,000 people gather for a week. There is a city that is well designed, and everything that happens during that event is created by the participants.
Not gonna lie, I'm having a hard time imagining like a handful of geeks traveling to Burning Man, but hey, maybe I had the wrong impression.
It's a major organization about getting the place, designing the city, making sure some public like bathrooms and that kind of stuff. But after that, like there is no lineup, no like big. It's not a big festival that is organized by like a centralized organization. It's what people makes it about. We were totally mind blown, not only about the scale of it, but also what the creativity of humanity can become if we put it in the right conditions.
I mean, one thing I learned about the Argentinians here online is that they have this interesting mix between being geeky, having a flair for design, and then having this strange and interesting idealism in many areas, especially around politics and monetary policy. And they just have these ideas that they stick with, but at the same time they are technical, and at the same time they have a flair for design. I think it's a quite unique combination. I've noticed this with a lot of people from Argentina. At the same time, they have this combination of having early exposure to Bitcoin, and this seems to be the product of it all.
So this user-generated festival was like an inspiration for us to come back and say, like, when we were talking about Decentraland, this was what we were talking about. Like, if we can make a space in which people can show their creativity, and we can all explore it online, that has the potential to be something great. So we come back with this idea and decided to do the second prototype, now a 3D experience.
I mean, that's a crazy idea that they brought back with them, and they're still sticking to this idea of allowing the community to be creative and to do whatever they want. And this has been a guiding principle for forever, at least in the past 4 years that I've been around. And I think a lot of the issues we are having in Decentraland today partly still persist because some of those original ideas that they will never allow to be abandoned, because this is the origin story. This is how everything started. And one of them being that they want to provide as much liberty as possible to the community to develop on the land. But the problem is with that is that it makes it only interesting for other geeks who are developers, who can use their multiple SDKs to create something in Decentraland. But everyone else is per default excluded. At least until now, this has been the case. But we're going to get to that point a little bit later on, I believe.
So this is a picture of the second prototype. You can see it was a cake deployed by a random user online called HP. Maybe you know him.
But it's funny, people are laughing. I don't know what the backstory to that is, but for sure we remember HP, the French guy who has been causing a lot of discussions in the DAO Discord when I was around because he persistently blocked a few things that we thought was really good and he didn't think so, and there was a he provided a lot of pushback on some of those items that the community members came with. And now looking back, he goes way back with these guys in history. So of course he has had a lot of leverage there. Now I don't know what has happened with HP, if he's still around or not, but it's quite interesting to experience this moment in the video right here.
So technically this was a little bit different. Now we took a Bitcoin node, like the open source implementation of Bitcoin. We fork it, so make a copy of it, and make one change. Something really great happened at the beginning on 2017. The prototype we launched on December of 2016. Early 2017, a YouTuber from the UK called Node saw our article, saw the GitHub, and he said, like, this is amazing, let's make a video.
I mean, if it's early 2017, that was the year of the bull market, one of the biggest bull markets ever. And this was in the beginning of it. So imagine looking back at this story right now in retrospect. They are just getting into the one of the biggest crypto bull markets in crypto history.
He has a big following, always chasing about the latest tech, edgy new technology out there, and we were perfect for his audience. And he made a video explaining Decentraland way better than we can do it. Totally. And I think,
well, I'm not surprised. Back in the days, like as I said, they were not really amazing communicators for a very long time. So what we're witnessing here is amazing. That Yemel is enjoying himself speaking in public like that. I don't know, maybe I had the wrong impression, but for me this is huge progress, and for him and for Decentraland.
I think that that was the first step in which Decentraland start going totally beyond ourselves. Like really, nowadays, Decentraland totally transcend the founders and the early contributors that now Decentraland is owned by or the community. But I think this was the first external contributor that make a huge leap in Decentraland. And that day we started receiving we have an open Slack that open for anyone who wants to contribute. That was only 4 of us. And one day we start receiving 1, 2, 10, 100 people.
I mean, I remember when the roadmap for Decentraland, and this was well in 2020, that was still on some kind of public Trello board, and so it's been pretty scrappy all the way into the launch of the actual product in February 2020. It's quite interesting to hear some of that history, how it led up to it.
In a few hours saying like, this is amazing and we want to be part. We saw the video and we were like, what video? And that was the point in which we said like, okay, maybe there is a chance this project becomes a company, something bigger than us. And I think that took us to the next stage of the project, the funding. That was the difference between being a hackathon project with a nice followee to becoming something serious that we can spend many, many years. I'm talking about things that happened 9 years ago, and here we are, different parts. But if we're going to get funding, we needed to have the founders, of course. We cannot all be part of this. Also, we have our own commitments, other companies, our projects. And the 2 heroes that stepped forward were Ari and Esteban. And they engaged in a mission of getting funding for Decentraland. And we knew that crypto and funding through crypto was an option, getting more and more adoption on 2017. Um, so a white paper was written explaining what's the concept of Decentraland. I think there are a few layers that define what Decentraland is.
Okay, it's getting a little bit geeky here, but it's quite interesting to see how some of the very basic idea around land ownership has been put together in 2017. The biggest bull market is happening, and they decide to use crypto for financing. I hope I understood that right.
Next years and makes a 3D immersive experience. You know, the second prototype we built, it was single player. You cannot see other people. So I think that's the
So this whole single player thing, I mean, this has been a little bit of a sickness of the Decentraland system all the way until like I joined, where if you are somewhere in Decentraland and there are other players who come onto the same piece of land, that it's not synchronized, and this whole infrastructure issue, this desynchronization of the multiplayer environment, this probably stemmed from this very first prototype where it was actually a single player experience. Quite interesting to kind of learn where all these kind of things that we know now came from.
the next milestone, migrating everything to the Ethereum network, redefining the project to run on Ethereum. Otherwise, we would have to have our own blockchain. Was announced at that point. And yeah, that was the starting of an adventure. Ari and Esteban got into many planes, going from New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, going to Asia. And I remember, I think, 2 weeks in which they took like 11 planes in the roadshow. And
like I've never experienced Ari being part of the community, but I've experienced Esteban, and quite interesting to see. I mean, we kind of knew his name. We've seen his name here and there, but we've never experienced him in the community. Like at least I didn't. And the truth is that a lot of these guys have been around for so long, but they were never outspoken publicly. They've never really engaged with the community, at least not that I was aware of it. There was very little engagement with the community. Well, Esteban here and there was active on Twitter. That is true.
Finally, in 2017, Mana was created. The project got funding, and a new chapter for Decentraland began.
Basically, bam, the cash just came in. Biggest bull market ever. Mana is on, and the rest is history.
So that was August in 2017, and now the team needed to build an organization. They need to hire people. They need to come up with a Decentraland Explorer, an experience that everyone can use and start creating. And in this process, it took many years. The public launch eventually was on 2020, so around 3 years of heavy work and development. I think one of the first things was designing the city. Also, many people participated in this process. Then, once the city was designed, there was a process of what we call the terraforming, the creation of the city, assigning owners to each of those parcels.
Now, if there is one thing that I do regret is not learning earlier about Decentraland, to have had the opportunity to be part of this here, to be able to create your own district, or to be able to participate in the land auctions this early, where, for example, Matty, some of you may still remember him, he used to be like the face of Decentraland on YouTube, this is how I think I kind of learned about the project in more detail. He was participating in these land auctions and was able to obviously cash in on this pretty nicely.
So there was an stage in which you can contribute your mana to participate in the first land auction of Decentraland. You can also contribute land to districts. If you were wondering how districts happen and came to be, this was the time in which you could contribute districts, mana to districts.
This is also the time where a lot of these districts overpromised and eventually underdelivered and created all this drama later on that many of you experienced in 21 and in 22. And also, what's interesting is that Matty was buying land for, I don't know what the exact value was, but for roughly $100 per land. And now, if you think about it, they were able to sell it at the peak for probably $10,000-$12,000, up from 100. These are huge multiples if you got the timing right.
So once you have your mana staked in the auction process, when the auction started, you could start selecting the parcels and making a bid. That process lasts for a couple of weeks. And if someone outbid you, the bidding process extended for a couple of more days so that push can continue. Eventually, all the bids stopped, and we had the first formation of Decentraland City. This is a heat chart that you can see, like on red, the different bids, and there are some more hot areas than others, and the areas that are totally black are
quite interesting. They're speaking about the hot areas. In the end of the day, looking back, this has never really played out. This whole idea around being close to the center or being close to a plaza or at least being close to a double road or a single road, well, it was reflected in the liquidity of the land NFTs. It's never really played out so nicely in terms of price. I mean, of course, a land somewhere on the side of the map was always valued under a land that was directly attached here somewhere to a road, but it hasn't really played out because foot traffic never played out. And I would like to see if eventually this will actually be a thing in Decentraland where location plays a much more important role.
Districts or plazas. So the next step, now that we have a smart contract for land, we have Genesis City created. The next step was developing the first marketplace to start trading this land. At that point, you cannot join the land and explore it. You cannot create on your land. You can only own it and transfer it and sell it on the marketplace.
That's also quite crazy if you think about it. Like, you're basically buying into an idea, into a concept without being able to actually visualize and understand how this would play out, right? You're buying a theoretical asset that nobody understands really, an NFT on a map that is not accessible and not buildable. It's crazy. If I think back, if I put myself into the shoes of Matty or into one of those early investors, I mean, they were taking on significant risk buying this kind of assets for $100 each. You have to remember, like, you could, for $100 you could probably buy an Ethereum instead, or people didn't understand the value of crypto. Depending on where this was in 2017, this may have been like quite a risky investment to buy this land. So I just want to say this because now that some of these properties are selling for at least 1,000 or 2,000 per land, or at least let's say 500 per land now in the bear market, we kind of understand what the future of this might be and how this might be valued. But back in the days, this was just theory.
But people wrote the white paper, they understood the project, and that was all they can experience at the time. Uh, Next, the, the team developed a builder, a web version that lets you easily drag and drop and start creating assets.
So this is the topic which I always get excited about because I always, when I joined, I found this builder and I actually quite liked it. It was very limited, but it clearly showed us the direction the builder was going to. If they would have improved upon these concepts here, I would have been happy. Unfortunately, this has never played out. Until today, we do not have a builder that is made for non-geeks.
I think a few of you joined Decentraland by this time when you can start creating
You're damn right we did.
your little on your little piece of land. And then we got the avatars, and we have names, so you can register your own name for your avatar, and also tie it to your land. And finally, on March 20 from 2020, Decentraland opened their doors to the mass. And I think that was a big accomplishment. Many of you maybe were part of the early betas. You could see how the team developed the Decentraland Explorer many times. I think 3 iterations of the Explorer were designed during this period before the public launch. The SDK, now we are in SDK 7. That means that there was a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, and the first.
To be honest, I've never paid attention to the iterations of the SDK. At least I do not recall. But what I would like to add here, I joined about 2 weeks after the public launch. Yeah, roughly. And I remember exactly those people who were permanently inside Decentraland back in the days. And they actually had podcasts specifically about trading wearables in Decentraland just about this time. It was one of the most exciting times also for me. You have to imagine all of the wearables were on Ethereum layer 1. You had those Bitcoin glasses, you had some of those early items like my Razer jacket, let's say. They have just been dropped or sold for the first time, and people were very actively buying up all sorts of NFTs, and they were cheap, like they were 20, 30 USD. Well, this sounds like expensive right now, but remember we are in a 2020. This is already in the next bull market, right? This is not 2017, end of 2017. This is already the beginning of 2020, which is just about, like, the bull market is just about to start in approximately 3 to 4 months from that launch date. So people were already familiar with NFTs. They were already familiar with Ethereum and this whole ecosystem and crypto specifically, and people wanted to speculate. So wearables trading was at the peak from what I remember at this time, because people were looking at mint numbers to differentiate between the same assets, and a mint 1 or a mint 2 would be so much more valuable than a mint 16, let's say, right? So people were building strategies, what will accumulate in value, what basically wearables were further out on the risk curve from mana, and you could buy mana to speculate, but you can go deeper and buy land, and if you're completely degen, you would go and actually try to buy up some of these L1 wearables. Which is interesting in retrospect, the whole economy around the wearables was literally killed by a few decisions later on, and but we can discuss this in a separate video sometime. But the thing is, with the introduction of L2 wearables, the ecosystem of L1 wearables was put into jeopardy, and until today, we do not have a whole lot of clarity in terms of how much value these items may or may not have. Basically, people holding mana would have done much, much better, and people holding land would have done quite well. So, a lot of us who have speculated on wearables back in the days really took a big L on during this time.
And yeah, finally, 2020, we opened the doors. Also, 2020 was an important point for the structure of Decentraland. The early company that built all these prototypes also transformed itself into Decentraland Foundation. The nowadays Decentraland Foundation was created in 2020. And also the smart contracts of the Decentraland DAO were created in 2020. The vesting contracts to fund foundation and the DAO were deployed on 2020 and setting up the stage for this new chapter for Decentraland, a more decentralized one.
And this kind of plays into something I said earlier. The Argentinian guys, they love their kind of political ideas, and the fact that they could have this um, DAO organization. And it's quite interesting that this demographic and the fact that they were young and university students and engineers, it kind of brought all of those ingredients together for them to be the pioneers. They've really, I mean, I think the Decentraland DAO was probably considered a pioneer in these decentralized organizations. They were the first one to take a stab at it, and everyone who followed were kind of, at least with one eye, looking at what mistakes were made in Decentraland and how they have dealt with it. And this is an endless topic, of course, but I find this quite interesting to hear the backstory and put the puzzle together one more time watching this presentation here.
That was the idea. And then we started having some rapid growth. This is a GIF of a time lapse of how Genesis City started growing, and hopefully will continue growing.
I mean, during this time, you have to imagine decentral games just started, if I recall this correctly, and they started to build their community. You people were you were able to meet all of these guys at meetups inside Decentraland. It was crazy. Everybody was very accessible, and people were hanging out. People were trying to understand what the future is in Decentraland. There were basically 12 to 20 people who were constantly present in Decentraland. And I'll touch on this a little bit later on again.
And this is the Decentraland we all know. At this time, we had also a change of leadership. Ari went to do another project. Esteban, also very tired of like a long journey of developing Decentraland, decided to bring a new leader to Foundation to lead this new chapter with new energy. That was when August Ferreira, also present here, decided to step in and yeah.
I definitely remember that time.
And take the lead on fantastic years of Decentraland. And this was the pictures of the first event hosted in Decentraland, a Halloween with many quests.
Well, one thing is that August actually reached out to community members and was, at least in the beginning, very available. And for some reason, later on, I've kind of lost sight of him. And yeah, just a note on that.
Also, first wearables were issued. At that time, wearables were layer 1. minted on Ethereum. We have a marketplace to trade those.
So this presentation, I think, is not 100% correct in terms of the timeline. Sometimes he's jumping a little bit forward, a little bit backward, because this is what I was talking about earlier. I mean, look at this. By the way, look at the prices here, right? The yellow pullover is at 2,500 mana. You have to remember that mana was about 2 to 3 cents back during this time, and in about 3 to 4 months, it would go up to 9 to 12 cents, if I remember correctly. So we were buying these wearables here based on rarity and based on mint numbers, and just to kind of add to what I said earlier.
Wearables also in Ethereum network. We have a Decentraland SDK with many sample scenes of the things.
Like, as I said, like nobody was using this stuff here. Very few people knew how to deal with the SDKs. I've dabbled with this particular SDK a little bit, but eventually the actual builder back in the days was still a better option for me to upload 3D assets, and you could actually animate through the builder and provide certain smart properties to the objects. Nobody from the people that I worked with has touched this SDK back in the days. Hence, the lands mostly were empty unless people got their hands on ready-made assets they could just upload through the builder.
Things that you can build. And the things that the creators.
You have to remember that this is a presentation which kind of puts Decentraland in a great light, and they've taken up the best bits and pieces and put them here. But if you spread these 16 scenes across a very big map, it would still be fairly empty. And this was always one of the major challenges in Decentraland, to make people build without providing them with an easy building system. So for the most part, it was devs who came and experimented, built something, and eventually moved on.
Build with it. It was a rapid pace in which we can see new content developed by the community, which was really, really amazing. Then we have the first Metaverse Festival. I think that was an epic event that bring many known artists and also joining with the community as well. I think was one of the first points in which we can prove that we can do an amazing experience in Decentraland.
Like, this Metaverse Festival came much, much later in my memory. It's quite interesting that he puts it in this sequence here.
Different artists from Paris Hilton to Deadmau5 and Rack and many others. Alice in Wonderland. And this is a short footage from Dead.
All we wanted back then was to find the free wearables. I think there was some kind of quest to get them. That's what people were busy with.
Mouse stage. Then other event, the Metaverse Fashion Week also make a big noise in Decentraland and the media as well. We find that fashion and the Metaverse were a good match.
Man, I don't remember how this worked exactly, but I believe we had 2 fashion weeks, and in the very first one, actual community members were able to create L1 wearables for Decentraland. Remember that now everyone can create wearables on Polygon, but there was a time for the very first fashion show week, and I hope I'm not mixing things up, where 5 or 6 or 7 different teams could apply to create their own wearables for that fashion week. And these were the actual L1 community created wearables that never came back, because eventually Decentraland switched over the system and kind of created this new ecosystem of L2 wearables. But there was this one opportunity for community members to create L1 wearables too. And I think this is what he's referring to. And I think we are a little bit out of sequence here, because this is probably a second fashion week, but I might be totally mixing things up.
The wearables had a really good fit, and we had also amazing experiences live there. And I think the combination between being able to create an amazing stage, having the ability to create your own wearables and publish them, and also a big community to join.
Yeah, now he said it. This was actually already L2 wearables people were able to create, and we can see it here from the screenshots.
And enjoy with. And we start seeing communities popping up all around the world, communities from Japan, Brazil, Argentina, the US. And I think that's the really core of Decentraland is the people that lives here. Something that many, what I heard is that Decentraland has the most welcoming community out there. When they go to another platforms and metaverses, they say like, okay, this looks nice, this is interesting, but where are everybody? And
Okay, if you grew up inside Decentraland from the beginning, you might not agree with this, but if you actually participate in other crypto related communities and come back to Decentraland, you will realize that Yemel is absolutely right. Decentraland is extremely nice, warm, and welcoming. And I need to admit this now, but at some point, if you're too deep into it, you don't actually see the contrast of what's happening outside, and you might have a different opinion.
in Decentraland, they find a community that welcomes them, that are willing to explain the process, the project. If you jump into a Discord, there are so many Discords that can help you out. Someone are more about building content, other about onboarding users, other about discussing the governance. I think these many phases of Decentraland is what make us
Yeah, discussing the governance wasn't always very friendly.
unique. Other important event is the Metaverse Pride, that also became kind of a tradition to celebrate in Decentraland. Then Art Week, also I think a really good fit for Decentraland to be able to have your own gallery and to show the creativity of
I mean, the art week, the only use case for metaverse real estate was actually to display art. It was a theoretical use case. I'm not sure how much adoption this got, but a lot of projects started to bank on this idea that you needed to have a virtual space to display your NFTs. And I think Art Week kind of uh, built on top of this idea.
different creators. This is a tradition we have been doing every year since 2021.
Also,
And I think
notice that he just showed us a date, July 2021. So we are now in the middle of the third big bull cycle, right? We've talked about the one in 2017, and we are now in 2021, approaching like the peak of the crypto bull market in approximately 3 to 4 months from here. Just to put some context.
for Decentraland to be able to have your own gallery and to show the creativity of different creators. This is a tradition we have been doing every year since 2021. And I think this is one of the tipping points of also Decentraland is the pandemic. I think
Yeah, this is funny because we were just in 2021. Now we're jumping back into 2020. But fair enough. I mean, some of you may have memories of buying these masks. We were buying these masks for like, I don't know, 0.08 Ethereum. This was, I think like $10 a mask back in the days. But let's continue watching.
we were ready for the biggest storm in the past years when the pandemic hits in many countries. There was a lockdown that lasted for a long time. In Argentina, we were
I mean, their timing was incredible. Launching in February 2020, and the pandemic like hits full on in March 2020. Like timing couldn't have been better for this.
in lockdown for, I don't know, a year and a half, like maybe 6 months that you cannot get out of your to the street. Uh, During that period, the president get to the TV show, to the TV saying like, this is only last for 2 weeks,
Yeah,
and
we
2 weeks
remember
later
that
will be
story.
was worth $5,000.
Oh yeah, by the way, check this out. Here is my name. Do you find your name here? Actually, there are quite a lot of people. I would say you have like 100% of the people active back in the days who came to register here and to buy one of these masks. Check if you know any of these people from Twitter, let's say. That's crazy actually how many people were already around. And I mean, I don't know all of those names, but I remember many of these. And yeah, as you just said, check out the Ethereum price. It's crazy.
Uh, and I think with this hype also we start getting a lot of attention from brands, businesses, big brands all around the world start looking Decentraland and the meta.
Remember the Atari shoes? Who remembers the Atari shoes? I remember us getting those from the Atari HQ, and we were able to sell those for like 800 bucks the next moment. I don't know, that was just an insane time. Like people were getting these sneakers with multiple accounts, selling them like from 250 to 800 dollars a piece. I believe those were the very first like L wearables, if I'm not wrong. I don't even remember if those were or not. Crazy. And he's just speaking about the other brands here as well.
The new space they want to check out and experience. It's an exploration for them, maybe used to traditional media, offline marketing, and maybe doing social media. Exploring and building a 3D interactive experience was something new to them and for us as well on how to deal with these brands. And, but we have many, many cases. Coca-Cola was one of the first that I think is worth mentioning. They did an auction of a loot box that contained many assets.
Also, during this time, you have to understand that there was a second wave of people who came into Decentraland. Everything up until this moment in 2020, it was really this core group that we've just seen during the kind of on the board earlier. And then the price of mana shot up significantly, and metaverse became like a thing. And I think Facebook announced their plans in relation to the metaverse, and a huge inflow of people came into Decentraland because they bought mana and they wanted to speculate and they wanted to follow the progress and they wanted to know like what is the metaverse all about. And people were standing in hundreds around the 00 Central Plaza, and this is where a lot of new prominent quote unquote community members started to join, as they wanted to capitalize on this new development, building out all sorts of discords and building communities and streaming entertainment shows. All of this started to happen around, I would say, beginning of 2021, maybe end of 2020.
Some of them were like a Decentraland wearable, animation, video, and also like a physical fridge, Coca-Cola branded, that they will deliver it to your house. I think that for collectors online, that this was huge. And we can also mention other artists and brands like Dolce Gabbana, Forever 21, Nickelodeon, Netflix.
Interesting. We don't see Artifact here, that is now owned by Nike. This was another brand that was kind of metaverse native, let's say. Some of us bought the first phygital goods with an NFT and an actual physical sneaker that was sent to us, and it was a crazy time because it was the very first time in my life where I spent like $2,500 on a sneaker because it came with an NFT, and then you could within a couple of weeks you could sell the NFT for 2,500, and you still have the sneaker, and then you got Decentraland equivalent shoes for free as an airdrop. It was such a crazy time because we were getting all of these airdrops, and at the same time we're all busy inside this community. It was lockdowns all over the place, and it was a huge hunt and gold rush, and suddenly that inflow of thousands and thousands and thousands of people come into the inside of Decentraland that is not actually ready to receive all of these people, and suddenly like the Decentraland main account following grew from, I don't know, 50,000 to like 500,000 in the shortest period of time. Imagine this is all happening during that time period.
Heineken, Samsung, JP Morgan, and many more. I think something that we can mention about what these brands are looking for, or what they were surprised when they see an experience in Decentraland, is the engagement time they find. If you compare it with social media, you can get maybe a few seconds of attention on a reel, on an Instagram, but with an immersive experience, you can get like 30 minutes of attention or more, and that's totally new for this kind of brand. So I think that was one of the biggest learnings.
I mean, you have to admit it, we were not ready for that inflow of brands and the inflow of people. And of course, I agree with the strategy of kind of wrapping it up as a past experience, and now he's going to talk about the new chapter going forward. And I think there is going to be an additional video that I'm going to do about the actual plans for the future. Um, but if you have been around during those days, I think everyone was totally overwhelmed by by the interest that Decentraland received. People were selling domain names, metaverse-related domain names, for 5 figures. Metaverse was just exploding. Uh, it's a beautiful time to remember, and I understand the gold rush and the euphoria we all had that kind of almost went beyond the peak of the bull market deep inside 2022, as in, I would say, up until April 2022, none of us was suspecting any kind of downturn in the NFT or metaverse space until we had to face the reality, even though the peak in the crypto space had been reached at that point in time.
And well, probably I'm going fast in this part because probably you already know it. The talk is about the early beginnings of Decentraland and the foundational story. And now I believe, we are starting a new chapter. Decentraland has many, many chapters, and this is a new one.
And just one more time, shout out to Yemel for making such a great presentation here, because I think when you seriously intend to move forward, you need to frame the past into a story and publish it somewhere for people to be able to consume it. And this allows you to kind of frame it correctly inside your brain to be open for a next step. I think this is really important. And it's also really important to kind of show how they have grown as people during this time. And they probably made some money, probably met a lot of people, and made their careers pretty much. So now they can focus on delivering an amazing product, because there is still a lot of work to do. And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos, because it kind of inspired me to see that something has shifted, something has happened. They stopped. We had the feeling that there was a divide between the community and the foundation, and now it feels like they're stepping out of the shadows into the public light. And I don't know what happened, but it's definitely a good development. Yeah, just wanted to add this right here.
I rejoined Decentraland, Decentraland Foundation last year, and we embarked in a big mission of bringing a new iteration of how Decentraland should look like and feel. And you are all going to learn about it later today.
So I think I'm going to wrap it up for this part. I think there's a next part coming up here. If I'm going to add my commentary there or not remains to be seen. I just wanted to make this little first video here with Yemel. And well, let's see. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope my comments were useful to add some additional context here and there. If you want to watch this whole video, feel free to go over to the Decentraland YouTube channel, guys. I see you in the next video. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Bye-bye.